You put drugs in the communities. You put guns in the communities. You put disease in the communities. You put poor food in the communities. All these things are designed to shorten your life expectancy. All these things are designed to give you physical issues and mental issues. These things are designed to keep you from thriving. The powers that be that are making that money at the top, they trying to kill us.
Ferguson is located in St. Louis, Missouri. It's pretty much located in what they call the north side of St. Louis. So this is the neighborhood I grew up in, right in Ferguson. We had a bunch of child deaths, so it was a very close-knit neighborhood. My sophomore year in high school, we lost like 6 kids, but it seemed like it was always every year. We lost kids every year. So this house right here, a good friend of mine was actually shot in his driveway right there. I remember him warming up his car, and he never made it to school that day. That's just how the neighborhood was. So this is right outside of my mom's neighborhood. This church is the entrance street to the neighborhood. And if you can see over in the far off corner, there actually used to be a basketball court there. And that basketball court was a savior for a lot of us. It kept us out of trouble. But they ended up having to take it down because you would think it would have been on a church lot, there was no violence, but actually somebody got killed on that parking lot. So they had to take the court down. You know, you think you'll have a fist-to-fist fight and somebody brings out a weapon. I got sliced right here in the chest in another fight. He went to catch me and I jumped back and he caught me like right in the middle here. The police here were known to be totally on the bad side. I had friends that wouldn't even come to Ferguson to meet up with me because they knew like they couldn't get pulled over here, or, you know, there's just so many different factors when dealing with the police over here. From all the people that I knew that I met up after leaving here, nobody had even heard of Ferguson until.
There is growing outrage tonight after an unarmed African-American teenager was shot and killed by police in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson, Missouri.
Michael Brown graduated from high school earlier this spring and was to begin college next week.
God bless his soul. Police shot this boy outside my apartment.
Reaction to the grand jury's decision left destruction in the streets of Ferguson this morning. Rioting protesters are furious that Officer Darren Wilson will face no charges in the shooting death of Michael Brown.
He was a role model for some. He stood up for a lot. Everybody just was attached to him, you know. I guess it was just his spirit, you know.
Had a big personality.
Yeah.
Mike wasn't the first kid that has been killed. And for people to come out in the numbers the way they did was just like unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it matched who he was, you know.
Gotcha.
He was a loving, giving person, always willing to help, you know, and it's no different than what I believe he would have done if it was one of his friends.
Sadly, black kids getting shot by cops is nothing new. Close to 500 black and brown people in the U.S. are killed by police every year, and most of them are youth. Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by police than white Americans. But it's not just the cops you have to worry about growing up here. Black youth are 14 times more likely to die from guns than white kids of the same age. Across all ages, black Americans are 504% more likely to die by homicide than white Americans.
The violence in St. Louis, we stay on the top of the charts, and I don't like how people brag about it. It's not nothing to brag about, but it has always been this way. You know what I'm saying? I remember back like '93 when I was a little itty bitty pup, and I seen things that I know I wasn't supposed to see, you know what I'm saying? And I know that it came with all the gangs and the things of that nature.
Drugs.
drugs came in heavy, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know an uncle or a parent that's not, you know what I'm saying? So we went through it all. It hit us hard in St. Louis. I know that for a fact.
Drugs affected my family. My birth mother was addicted to crack cocaine when I was born, and she planned on basically selling me for drug money. But thankfully, my grandmother intervened.
And I did everything but get on my knees to beg her to keep the baby, and found out that she had already signed papers to actually have you adopted for the nice sum of $2,000, by the way. And I didn't find that out until 2 weeks before you were born. So I legally adopted you as mine, and you were never my grandchild. Never. You've always been my child.
Yep.
Always treated you as my child. I always called you as my child.
Yeah.
People ask, your grandchild or your child? My child.
Exactly. Yeah.
To this day.
Growing up the way I had, I was painfully aware of the reality of drugs and violence. Over 15,000 people are murdered in the U.S. every year, and over 70,000 people die from drug overdoses. Mainstream media always seems so heavily focused on drugs and guns in black and brown communities, but they never talk about how they got there. The government permits more gun shops in black neighborhoods and has knowingly allowed drugs to be dumped in low-income communities. While mainstream media won't talk about this story, you know who does? Hip-hop.
Hip-hop was born out of the whole idea and the concept of setting the record straight.
Most of the time what you're hearing in hip-hop is actually what's going on day to day on the concrete in the street. A hip-hop artist is like a news reporter.
You know, telling the stories of the people, is keeping it real in their lyrics, you know, keeping people on point.
So hip-hop is a voice to get the message out, like this is what's going on in our communities.
Those were the first people that was basically speaking on justice in our community.
I think it's crucial that we take the current events of the world, take that, put it in art form, into a rhyme.
So like a reporter.
That says it in a way that makes you dance.
In a relatable, understandable way that made me passionate about it.
Hip-hop is like the CNN of the hood, right?
Hip-hop was created because of the lack of justice in our communities.
Hip-hop was built on the black struggle.
Hip-hop is created from a need for social justice.
What other platform has even honored our right to speak and speak our story and our truth?
So it was always about social awareness. I learned a lot of what was happening through hip-hop.
We are the people who have thick skin. Like rhinoceros in the jungle, we have the toughest in the land. From the bottom of the mud to the richest of sands, we are the people who see no difference in the color of our skins. In fact, we know that we're the same in this melting pot we're in, where crooked cops patrol our blocks, killing our kids, getting away with murder where the system pulls strings like puppet masters over their heads. Even though we are strong, enough is enough, so together we pledge. For one nation under God, for which it all stands. Standing side by side, my fellow sister and brother man, we are not light-skinned, nor dark-skinned, nor black or white, not Chinese or Japanese or Indian or Indie, so together we fight for all equality of spirit through all human rights. For we are peaceful with actions, but with words we are lethal. For we are one, thick-skinned people.
A lot of the familiar themes I was accustomed to hearing in hip-hop had mirrored what I experienced myself. But a line from Stick from Dead Prayers stopped me in my tracks.
Poor Dyers kill more brothers than pistols.
Wait, what'd he say?
Poor Dyers kill more brothers than pistols. We fighting for our lives like Michael Vick's pit bulls.
Mainstream media is always talking about black-on-black crime killings, but I've never seen them talking about us dying from what we eat. Actually, the leading causes of death for African Americans are heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes. Almost half of all African Americans have some form of cardiovascular disease, and a quarter have diabetes.
I don't know life without diabetes.
My mother is a 2-time cancer survivor.
Why does my family have high blood pressure?
My dad has fatty liver disease and diabetes now.
My father was a diabetic.
My family is running rampant with diseases.
Why does my family have diabetes?
I have family members with diabetes. I have family members with heart disease.
Like the whole thing.
Why does my family have heart disease?
A lot of people in my family have passed away early with heart attack.
Why is my family dealing with these issues? What is that?
Damn. That's right. My own family was dealing with these diseases too. When my mother was diagnosed with colon cancer, it shook us all. It particularly hit hard seeing someone I love so much go through so much pain. My mom has always been such an incredibly strong woman. She's the rock of the family. But watching her go through cancer treatment was the first time ever I heard her ask for help. She took on raising me by herself in her 40s, even though she didn't have to, because she never backed down from what needed to be done. Seeing my mom suffer, I needed answers to why this is happening to her and the community. So I went on a mission to speak with experts around the country.
Most of the heart disease, cancer, diabetes, stroke, high blood pressure, and even much of the autoimmune problems that we see, such as lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel diseases, is a direct outgrowth of the way that people eat.
Nearly half of all deaths from heart disease, stroke, and diabetes are directly attributable to a poor diet. So not to smoking, not to being sedentary, not to your family history or your genes, but literally directly related to a poor diet.
Many of the chronic diseases that used to be associated with older people, such as diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, are now manifesting in millennials.
I realized while these diseases are affecting huge segments of the population, they are disproportionately affecting African Americans. Black Americans are 30% more likely to die from heart disease than white Americans. Black Americans are 60% more likely to die from stroke than white Americans. Black Americans are 2 times more likely to die from diabetes than white Americans. Black Americans are 2 times more likely to die from stomach cancer than white Americans.
African American men, 60% more likely to end up with prostate cancer than Caucasian men. And when we develop prostate cancer, we get much more aggressive and deadly forms of the disease, so that once an African American man gets prostate cancer, we're more than twice as likely to die from it.
A lot of the rates of these illnesses, especially diabetes and cancer, kidney failure, is sometimes 2 to 3 times higher in a Caucasian population.
So if 20% of the population has diabetes, I would say that a good 45% of the African American community is going to have it.
Why are black folks dying from these diseases at such higher rates? I know they said it was diet, but it seems like it has to be something with genetics, right?
We do have genetic susceptibility to certain diseases, but having a genetic susceptibility to a disease will only come into play if you're in a high-risk environment. It's the diet that's driving the disease.
There may be vulnerabilities that are genetically modulated, but it's the epigenetic variables, it's the diet, the lifestyle that's going to be determining whether those vulnerabilities are turned on or not turned on.
You stay away from that diet, you're going to be all right.
There was a study published in 2017 that showed that a poor diet was a diet that was high in processed meats, a diet that's high in sodium, and a diet that's high in sugar-sweetened beverages. Just eating those foods is responsible for half of deaths from heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And in this study, what emerged was that there were racial and ethnic disparities there, because among blacks and among Latinos, their percentage of deaths due to heart disease, stroke, and diabetes was even higher as it relates to poor diet.
Johns Hopkins compared 2 different communities in Baltimore. One community was an affluent white community and the other one was a low-income black community. What they found was that there was a 20-year life expectancy difference. The main thing that they were able to pinpoint was that there was a huge difference in what they were eating.
When you're in an impoverished neighborhood, you don't have a Whole Foods next to you, but you'll definitely have a KFC, you'll definitely have a Wendy's, you'll definitely have a McDonald's, definitely have a Burger King. You know what I mean?
All the fast food chains, they put them in neighborhoods that are more prone to being affected by the things that they're putting in them, and it's on purpose.
It's by design. It is not accidental that this is what's in the hood and this is what's over there.
I came from a poor neighborhood. After school, before school, just hanging out, fried chicken, Chinese food, pizza, McDonald's, Burger King.
It was Pop-Tarts and macaroni and cheese and pizza and Chinese food, Philly cheesesteaks.
Nothing but canned foods, boxed foods, processed foods galore.
It was always a candy bar, Twinkies or a cupcake or cheese doodles or something processed. We ate to survive.
Trying to eat a healthy diet in a world designed to make you fat, sick, and miserable is a difficult process. It's even more difficult if it's physically difficult to even get access to health-promoting food. So if you happen to live in a neighborhood where there's not access to whole natural foods easily available, it's going to be even more difficult, more roadblocks.
On all of these corners, all it is fast food restaurants. Tell me the last time you seen like a Whole Foods and fresh fruit and stuff like that over in the hood. It's like systemic.
Food deserts describe basically a number of grocery stores within a community and how far they are.
Food deserts, represented in red, show neighborhoods without grocery stores within a half mile. When overlaid with the neighborhood's predominant race, it's clear to see that food deserts disproportionately affect African Americans and communities of color. Even when adjusted for income, Black and brown communities have less access to healthy foods than their equally impoverished white counterparts.
Only about 8% of African Americans even live in communities that have a grocery store in them.
In the food deserts, you only have the opportunity to eat what's in the desert.
Everything in the hood is how much? $1.99. You get 2 for $1. So your mother, who doesn't have much, gives you $5. You gonna try to make that stretch. And when you go outside in your area, it's easy to make a stretch because you can get 10-piece nuggets for $1.
Unhealthy foods, fast foods, you go to the corner store, you get a sandwich with lunch meat. We all know lunch meat's not good for you. There's no reason for us to even be eating that.
Then you could go to the corner store and you could get you like a 75-cent juice. It's not even juice, it's like colored liquid.
But it's cheaper and it's accessible and it's what people grow up on. So I eat what my parents eat and they take me to eat at places that they go to eat and they take me to eat at places that are convenient and cheap.
So you grow up and it becomes a generational thing. My mom bought McDonald's for me, or my mom prepared fried foods and processed foods every day for dinner. So that's what I do for my children.
Well, most kids in lower income, they face not having any food.
It is easier to obtain food that is hazardous than it is to obtain food that is nurturing.
The trip is, we keep calling it food, and it's not food. They don't have food.
Death is cheap. You can get $5 Kentucky Fried Chicken, $5 Burger King, $5 Taco Bell. Everything is garbage and cheap.
People living in poverty are trying to survive.
Ain't nobody got no gas money to be going all across town if we got a car. You know what I mean? One. So it's gonna have to be something right around here. What's available and what's the cheapest? You know, that's pretty much how we making those decisions in the hood.
Economics also dictates which type of stores will be available.
I've lived in a poor neighborhood, I lived in a middle class neighborhood, and I lived in a wealthy neighborhood. It's a big difference between the food that's just there and the markets you go to. It's a big difference in the quality of food.
If you go to more affluent neighborhoods, white neighborhoods, you'll see competition amongst healthy food stores, all right? Whereas in black neighborhoods, you see competitions amongst convenience stores.
You go to Beverly Hills, you go to different places, you ain't seeing no Popeyes, bro. You ain't seeing no check cashing stores.
Yeah, it's fast food, liquor store, bail bonds.
And gun shops.
And gun shops.
Yeah. In the United States, there are more gun shops and gun dealers than there are grocery stores. In fact, there are close to 15,000 more gun dealers than grocery stores. And yet again with Baltimore, they are disproportionately located in communities of color. City councils and planning commissioners will often permit more liquor stores in communities of color than they will in white communities. Not only are there fewer grocery stores in these communities, but some chains are actually preventing new grocery stores from opening up even after they've left the neighborhood, further robbing a community of access to healthy food.
A lot of grocery stores, they have clauses in there that when they leave, for the next 15 to 20 years, another grocery store can't operate there. So the community is left without an option. They're either on foot, they're on the bus. Like transportation is an obstacle. There's a rule for traveling on the bus, you can only have 2 grocery bags.
What?
Yeah. So if you're going grocery shopping and there's a 2-bag limit and you're feeding a family of 4 or 5 maybe. Or one. Yeah, you're restricted. I mean, there's so many things that prevent low-income people of color from being healthy. How can you take a grocery store from a neighborhood and not allow another one to come?
It's an absolute travesty that we're living in a society where that kind of access to healthy food is denied to entire populations of people.
When supermarkets were introduced, there were codes and laws and statutes that were passed that said you could no longer have more than 6 fruit trees in your front yard. You could no longer give your food to your neighbor. So those codes and statutes and laws are normally never written by oppressed people.
There's actually an active hand in making sure that we living like this.
You have the excuse that there's not enough economics in this, quote, poor neighborhood, but yet there's tons of fast food places in this same community and liquor stores that are thriving. So the money is there. It's just the choice of you're not wanting to serve this community. Why? It's not because of money. It must be something else.
It's affecting Black and brown communities more than it's affecting other communities. That's just a fact.
They show you the lack of concern for the people of this community, the health of this community. The injustice isn't being fairly spread around. It's here, pocketed in our communities and communities of color. It does feel like they're trying to kill us. It feels as though we're trying to be rubbed out.
They keep food deserts in low-income areas. The government has all the power to change everything. Not gonna do it.
If I can control the food and the water, I can control you.
I think access to healthy food is definitely a civil rights issue and a financial issue, a depopulation issue, and just a wicked issue in general, my brother.
While food deserts in urban African American communities are terrible, they pale in comparison to what Indigenous Americans face. The Navajo Nation, an area the size of West Virginia, has barely a dozen grocery stores for the entire population.
So we have only 10 grocery stores, official grocery stores. We have like 100 convenience stores. 80 to 90% of these stores are only carrying junk food. The three top killers of Navajo, they're all food and health related. The latest statistics said that 30% of our population have type 2 diabetes. And they're telling me now it's reaching up to 35%. And it's reaching down, what is scary, down to children. So I've had so many relatives that have had cancer and diabetes and sitting in dialysis centers. It just broke my heart. I went to see my auntie and the room had like 50 Navajo elders sitting in wheelchairs with amputated limbs. It was so sad.
Historically, indigenous communities around the world are generally healthy places. In the 50s and 60s, it was thought that Dene folks didn't have diabetes because everyone was basically, healthy and they were eating foods that were grown locally. And it was fascinating in the 90s, the KFC franchise with the highest per capita sales were highest here on the reservation.
It's a deep root problem is the food situation.
One of the primary means that the government has used to control minority populations is to place them in positions of food insecurity. Because if you can control a person's or population's access to food, you can control the person. So what did our government do when it wanted to control Native Americans? The first thing it did was it came in and it displaced the nations off their fertile land.
It started when we were imprisoned in Fort Sumner, when our people had to walk 300 miles one way. And we were incarcerated, 12,000 of us.
It deliberately burned and destroyed their crops.
They burned all of our cornfields, our orchards, they slaughtered our animals.
Then it moved them onto marginalized land called reservations that were deliberately chosen because they were lands that were infertile, difficult, or impossible to cultivate.
And they starved us out.
They then became dependent on the U.S. government for their food.
Fort Sumner, all they gave us was government food. And we were incarcerated for 4 years. So that's what we call prison food.
And what did the government provide them? White rice, white flour, canned meat, sugar, alcohol. All of the things that we know are associated with chronic disease.
We're still eating prison food. It has been orchestrated from day one, from 1776 forward, and even before then, to annihilate and abolish American Indians.
What happened with African Americans? With us, we were literally dragged out of our traditional culture in West Africa and locked onto slave labor camps that were referred to in a very genteel fashion as plantations. They were slave labor camps. And these people were imprisoned on these slave labor camps where they were literally worked to death.
80% of Americans don't understand what it meant to be a slave.
They think, because of the way it's taught, that it just means that someone had ownership over you. It was degradation, it was emasculation, it was humiliation. They would despiritualize you. The same person had to feed you. Now let's think. What was the food?
They were fed the garbage of those camps. So they were fed the entrails, the feet, the ears of the animals.
Pig ears, pig skin, pig feet. The only reason you even eat that is because that was what was thrown out by master.
They would say the master ate high from the hog. That's why we ate pig's feet and pig's intestines, which were riddled with bacteria and disease and feces and all types of stuff. You know, this is what they gave us. This is where the concept of scrapple and all these things come from.
So the plantation diet would consist of some chitlins and some type of pork and maybe some cornbread and stuff that you may consider soul food now.
You had to use what was left, and that was passed on, and we even started naming our food like soul food, you know.
Then it became just a way of loving and showing love to our family, because there wasn't a lot of happiness in different ways, but we could show happiness through food, and so it became more comfort food.
The psychological effects of colonization, you know, are layers and layers deep.
Dr. Joy DeGroot talks about just the post-traumatic slave syndrome, and a lot of things that have been passed down as culture really was trauma and survival tactics.
So now, as opposed to you or your great-great-grandfather, grandmother getting the scraps and making the best as they can with things, you make it a delicacy.
Tradition has become very unhealthy and deadly for the Black community because of what, number one, we have access to, but what has become a tradition from slavery and the things that we pour into our body is awful and detrimental.
Tradition is a powerful and sometimes tragic thing. You know, when you go to Alabama and you see a good old boy and he's got his Southern flag up, that's his tradition. That's his family, that's in his blood. But his tradition is dangerous. His tradition is divisive. His tradition is bad for him and the people that's around him. His tradition is unhealthy. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Like, these traditions that we hold on to are unhealthy. Why would you love something that hates you? You fighting against your own interests.
So Black people are trying to preserve some of their culture by eating soul food. But what they don't realize, soul food is from slavery. That's the only culture we got, slavery.
This is not the way West Africans traditionally ate. This is what we were force-fed when we were enslaved.
What was great in the past that came from this tradition? What was so wonderful? You know, and identify what those things are and keep those things and identify those things as a tradition. So if you're thinking, oh, it's family dinner on Sunday, right? Well, what you really loved was being with your family on Sunday and sharing a meal. It wasn't the pig's feet, you know? That's not what it is. That's not the fried chicken that's bringing the family together. The family is coming together and cooking. It's an act, the act of service between people, the camaraderie, the catching up, the talking. Those things don't need unhealthy habits to exist and be the tradition.
It's sad that this recipe that you grew up with is the reason that a lot of your older relatives are in the state that they're in.
You eat how your mama eat. You got the same diseases your daddy had. We prayed over that nasty stuff. You know, God bless this slavery food that we won't stop eating.
We no longer have to do this. The sad fact is that as African Americans, we are carrying the last vestiges of slavery on our plates. It's not soul food, it's plantation food. This is not our traditional heritage. This is not the way West Africans traditionally ate. West Africans had agrarian-based communities where they grew their own crops, had diets that were built around whole foods, whole grains, vegetables, no dairy, very little animal food.
A lot of what we ate were plant-based. And if we ate other beings, it wasn't all the time, every day, all day long, extra, extra, extra. It was what we needed, and that was it.
A study conducted by the University of Pittsburgh showed that when Black Americans adopted a more traditional African diet, high in fiber, fruits, vegetables, low in fat, with little to no meat, after only 2 weeks, they started producing more anti-cancer molecules in their bodies, proven to protect against colon cancer in particular. In the same study, when Black Africans switched from their traditional foods to an American diet, their bodies produced microbiota that were cancerous. African Americans suffer more than double the rates of hypertension than people in West Africa. But as Western diets have begun to pervade the African continent, hypertension goes with it.
So it's not like a biological thing with Black people. It's something about being here that's making Black people sick.
If we look at prostate cancer, it is about double in African American men compared to white men. If you look at colorectal cancer, it's higher in African Americans compared to whites. Cardiovascular deaths, same story. This is not due to any difference in genetic factors, because when we look in Africa, we don't see higher rates in Blacks in Africa. We do see it in the United States. It's food.
As a doctor, there's a lot of foods that I'm concerned about that my patients are eating. And I would say at the top of the list are processed meats. And those are foods like ham, bacon, hot dogs, sausage, salami, cold cuts, sandwich meats. These are really prevalent everywhere. And a lot of people don't even recognize these foods as being processed meats. These are foods that are well known and documented to increase the risk of cancer as well as heart disease and diabetes. So these are foods that really don't belong in the diet at all.
There's a direct correlation with the amount of animal food in the diet and the incidence of chronic diseases such as heart disease, cancer, stroke, high blood pressure, autoimmune problems, so forth.
There's so many studies that show that a high animal diet increases your risk for cancer. Even in the CDC, they've been saying it. They said straight out, this stuff causes cancer. Are they still selling hot dogs?
According to the World Health Organization, looking at over 800 studies found a direct link between processed meat and cancer. It's a group 1 carcinogen, the same group as tobacco and alcohol, definitively causing cancer in humans. According to the report, 1 hot dog a day increases your risk of developing colorectal cancer by 18%. Eating 2 servings of processed meat a day, like bacon for breakfast or cold cuts for lunch, has a similar impact on risk of colorectal cancer as smoking. And yet these foods are served every single day in public schools, hospitals, prisons, and government facilities. If you were to take the lunch tray from a public school, a hospital, and prison and mix them up like a 3-cup shuffle, you wouldn't be able to tell which is which.
You know it's bad, but you gonna feed it to your child. Like, that's a baby. You love the hell out that baby. And you feeding that baby something that could possibly kill him it could kill him now. It's kids with cancer, that stuff deep as a mug.
We know that red meat, beef is related to cancer of the colon, cancer of the stomach. Smoked fish is related to cancer of the stomach.
And some people say, oh, chicken is good, chicken is better. Then chicken is just as bad. It clogs it just as bad, if not worse. People think of chicken as a health food because it's promoted as being healthier than foods that are really, really bad for you.
For men with prostate cancer, eating a lot of chicken increases the risk of the disease progressing 400%. Chicken is the #1 source of sodium in adult American diets, directly linked to high blood pressure. It's also the #1 source of dietary cholesterol. Women who eat lots of chicken also have higher rates of UTIs because chicken meat is so laden with bacteria. 95% of chicken breasts sampled were contaminated with fecal bacteria.
The big problem is that people are getting 93% of their calories either from animal foods, meat, fish, fowl, eggs, and dairy products, or pleasure-trapped chemicals that are added to food, things like oil, salt, and sugar, to stimulate the dopamine cascade of our brain and lead us to overeating.
Sugar and salt is like coke and dope. I'm addicted to the salt, the sugar, I'm addicted to the grease, you know what I mean? A whole shebang.
Sugar, one of the biggest drugs on the planet. And our babies are totally addicted to this stuff.
To the average 2 to 7-year-old that's only about this tall, what's eye level in the grocery store? Come on, talk to me. the candy. That's what it looks like to them. So through their lens, you're not gonna have a healthy conversation about avocados, man, and watermelon and plums and peaches. You're not.
One way to get people really addicted and keep buying into a particular food is sugar. Sugar is just a few molecules away from crack and cocaine. And so it's hard to break the crack and cocaine addiction. And that sugar is so dangerous because it causes people to snap, cause mood swings, become volatile, become aggressive just by having sugar.
It has a lot to do with inflammation in general, and we know that inflammation is a root cause of basically most chronic diseases. When you say sugar, then it's things that have the added sugars to it, which is basically all processed food. That's why a grocery store is the size of department stores. Well, because 80% of the store is processed. We have a health food aisle in the grocery store. That makes no sense to me. The whole thing should be health food, and then you have an aisle of junk, you know, if that's what you want.
So when you add sugar to a food, you're adding unnecessary calories and you're adding a substance that does not promote health. But when you eat foods that are naturally rich in sugar, like fruits, you're actually getting fructose, or the sugar in fruit, along with fiber. You're getting it with antioxidants, you're getting it with phytonutrients, and that whole package together is an extremely healthful package. Fruit has never been shown to cause diabetes. Fruit lowers the risk of heart disease, it lowers the risk of stroke, it lowers the risk of cancer, it lowers even the risk of diabetes. It helps people lose weight. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with eating whole fruit.
We naturally crave sweet. Why? Because sweet is fruit. Sweet is healthy, right? But the food industry uses our natural tendencies towards these foods against us, hijacks our palates by giving us these over-salted, fatty, sugary foods. It kind of turns our natural biological impulses against us.
When you're having a lot of added sugar, it fulfills the same areas of enlightenment as some of these street drugs. So it's highly addictive, and we've thrown it in everything in the United States in the last 20, 30 years, especially in the form of high fructose corn syrup, which definitely acts in a different manner than glucose does. I mean, numerous studies have shown that. You know, that's another thing that you find in a lot of these urban environments, you know, is first ingredient water, second ingredient sugar, or high fructose corn syrup.
Corn syrup or other corn products are in virtually all processed food. Corn is one of the most heavily federally subsidized commodities in the U.S. In 2017 alone, the federal government gave out over $5.1 billion to help corn farmers grow even more corn. These taxpayer subsidies have kept the price of corn products artificially low, making things like corn oil and high fructose corn syrup ridiculously cheap. No surprise we can see corn in virtually all junk food. Even the meat people are eating is connected to corn. Farm animals eat the majority of corn grown in the U.S. as a cheap way to fatten them up for slaughter, even keeping the price of meat artificially low. With all the federal subsidies, the meat and dairy industry received $38 billion to prop it up and to keep unhealthy foods cheap. That's more than the entire spending for all Section 8 housing vouchers. Only 11% of low-income households receive federal assistance, while more than 38% of U.S. farmers receive federal subsidies. That's the real welfare issue. If you take into consideration all the externalized costs of the meat and dairy industry that are imposed on society, a $4 Big Mac would actually cost $11.
If animal products were priced where they should be without all the government support, without all the government welfare, this being added to the equation, very few people would even be able to afford these animal products.
If you look at, say, the meat industry, everybody knows it contributes to heart disease. Everybody knows it contributes to cancer, and yet what gets subsidized the most? The feed grains going into the cattle, going into the pigs, going into the chickens, so it makes meat cheap.
The federal government gives massive subsidies to commodity food producers so they can make cheap, processed food, which makes their profit margins higher. The reason the government does this is because food corporations pay for congressmen's re-elections through their lobbyists to push through these policies. It's a pay-for-play system. Over the last 30 years, the meat, dairy, and egg industries have given over $134 million to U.S. congressmen.
And so the government really doesn't have an interest in looking out for the health of the population because the government basically is being controlled and run by corporate interest, period.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture, along with Health and Human Services, is responsible for creating the dietary guidelines for Americans. These guidelines, formerly known as the Food Pyramid, dictate all federal food policies. The committee responsible for creating these guidelines has been made up of people that have received money from the meat industry, fast food industry, sugar industry, alcohol industry, and virtually all processed food industries.
So whether they're working for these entities or being lobbied by these entities. That's really what's going on. There's too much money in the sickness for them to actually do their job, which is supposed to be to look after the country.
The people that are telling us what's right or wrong are paid for by the people that aren't doing necessarily what's right. Whoever has the most money is the one that ultimately makes the law, and that doesn't make it right, because most of the people that had the bread cheated.
The food industry is very conscious of influencing government policy by controlling how they spend their money. And apparently we're electing people to office that are vulnerable to being influenced by that money and how it's spent.
When I reached out to federal representatives for questioning, I got no response. One of the few politicians willing to speak out about this issue is New York City Brooklyn Bureau President Eric Adams.
So although we have a crisis that the Department of Health is trying to fight in childhood diabetes, childhood obesity, childhood asthma, the Department of Health is spending millions of dollars to fight that crisis. Yet every morning in New York City, we feed 980,000 meals to our children that causes childhood diabetes, childhood asthma, childhood obesity. So we're feeding the crisis that we have. Our senior centers, our hospitals, Department of Correction facilities, those prisoners are not running out to their local 7-Eleven to get junk food. They're being fed by the institutions. So when you start to do a real analysis of this crisis that we're facing, and you start to look at the hidden hand, you see that government is feeding the crisis. And once our folks start to realize that, listen, man, you guys have been playing us. There's one thing black folks hate, don't play me. And once they realize they're playing us, there's going to be a game changer throughout the entire country that's going to sweep the entire globe.
Another major food program the government oversees is public food assistance. So I went to speak with government food policy expert Kyle Ash.
SNAP is formerly called food stamps. It's the main food welfare program in the United States. It's providing food assistance to about 10% of the US population. SNAP participants are worse off in terms of diet-related disease. If you're on SNAP, you're more likely to be obese and suffer or die from almost every single diet-related disease. $80 billion a year is what the SNAP budget is. I mean, that's a lot of money. Most of the money is going to buy animal products or junk food. If you're talking about soda alone, sugary, carbonated beverages, it's about 20%. So it makes total sense that Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, the large makers of soda, would want things to stay the way they are, right? Yum Brands, which owns Taco Bell and Pizza Hut and some other fast food chains, has promoted this flexibility with SNAP so people can actually buy fast food junk with their SNAP dollars. Imagine if in a food desert, say in Southeast DC, where people can't walk to a grocery store to buy produce. But if USDA prioritized healthy food, so the SNAP dollars had to go to something that was healthy, that actually provided nutrition for the people that rely on it, the bodega would stock that stuff because that's the money that they're getting. They're getting SNAP dollars. They will start stocking healthy foods. You'll start to address the problem of food deserts. The largest lobbyists against improving SNAP for the benefit of the participants' nutrition are companies like Kraft and Coca-Cola. And we heard this directly from policymakers themselves. They're the ones who were coming to the room and asking them to please do not prioritize healthful foods with SNAP dollars. The onus is on the government to change the program. It's a government program. Let's empower SNAP participants to eat more healthfully. That seems to me a more appropriate frame for a public health policy.
Another major assistance program is WIC, providing women, infants, and children with food. When health advocates urged the government to include more fruits and vegetables in the WIC package, the meat and dairy industry actually lobbied against it, preventing low-income mothers and their children access to more healthy foods.
Industry will do any darn thing it can to protect its turf and protect its income, even if it means that you're going to pay a price, even if it means your family is going to have higher mortality. That's what they'll do. They will not stop.
The history of government food support programs is almost sinister in the sense that it's a way of agribusiness enriching itself under the guise of helping poor people. They essentially overproduce these commodity foods and then sell them to the government, which then dumps them into communities of color, and the producers get richer and the communities of color get sicker and poorer.
The government even oversees a federal marketing program called Checkoffs, created to promote these unhealthy foods.
And you've probably heard some of the advertising slogans like,
the incredible edible egg, or milk, it does a body good. That was a state checkoff program. The milk mustache was a checkoff advertising program. Just a whole slew of them. The federal government oversees the ones that promote kind of the worst food product. The official purpose is promotion, research, and information. And so they create these research programs, the only purpose of which is actually to drive the economic interest in whatever the commodity is. So in this case, they decided, hey, well, maybe we can sell beef to young mothers and have their infants be eating beef as their first solid food. This is the, your 5-month-old kid should eat beef.
It literally has the beef stamp at the bottom of it. Like, anytime you see a baby and the beef stamp, there's something wrong.
The food system is selling us things that's not what it says it is. It's advertising things without full disclosure.
When you got the money, you got lobbyists, you got the FDA behind you, and then you can put up all these ads on TV, and you try to control the narrative.
Commercials and ad campaigns work. It's just, you see how good this looks? It's good for you. Even though if it's literally death on a plate.
They tell kids, you gotta love this, you gotta love this. And they tell parents, this is cheap food. You can feed your family with this.
We're not eating this way just because we woke up and said, let's eat garbage today. It's because that was what is purposely fed to us.
What's happening now is people are getting access to highly heated, beaded, treated processed foods, and it stimulates their dopamine cascade and essentially sets up almost a similar situation that you see in addiction.
They're trying to make money from us, even if it's at the expense of killing us. It's like being a drug dealer. So when I was a drug dealer, I really had no conscience of the drug addicts and what my effect on my drugs did to them. I didn't give 3 fucks. And I think that's just how a person that sells food feels. They just don't really look at their consumer. They don't care about their customer. They just want the money.
We need to be as determined to find a solution to the current food system and the way that these unhealthy, horrible foods are being just dumped into these communities. We need to see that as much of a threat as we saw crack being dumped into our communities.
The crack epidemic has decimated communities. But even at the height of close to 14,000 crack and cocaine overdose deaths in the US per year, that still is not even 1/40th of the number of deaths from just heart disease.
It's 600,000 people dying of heart disease every year. Those are lives. You know what I mean? As bad as the police is in our communities, they ain't even that bad. They ain't bad as the hamburger.
It's really killing way more people than police brutality is and inner city violence. People are dying, in droves of all economic statuses.
Of course police brutality matters. Of course we should be outraged. Of course we should have a movement to stop that. But if it's about lives mattering, we have to recognize it on the same playing field as police brutality. You know what I mean? It's diet brutality, it's substance brutality, access brutality. Because poor diets kill more brothers than pistols. We fighting for our lives like Michael Vick's pit bulls.
As black men, we're dying off so quickly in so many ways.
We definitely say the fork is worse than the gun.
We're dying more from poor food than we are from any other thing.
You just die slow. Your family just watches you die.
I see families being torn apart by death, whole entire families being decimated by preventable diseases.
Going to the funerals where at the repasts there was fried chicken, chitlins and all these things that were the very things that contributed to the death of the person that we were mourning.
Looking at all this death, I started thinking about all the people involved in these companies. I wondered, how do they sleep at night knowing what they are doing to children, families, and entire communities? So I started digging. Popeyes, one of the world's largest fast food chicken chains, found predominantly in black communities that uses almost exclusively black people in their marketing, with black spokesperson Annie, is white founded, white owned, and white managed. Church's Chicken, a popular fast food chain in black neighborhoods, is also white founded, white owned, and run. KFC is owned by Yum Brand, is again white owned and operated. The stereotype of black people loving fried chicken seems to be of white making. And while these companies' products aren't exclusively killing black folks, it's clear to see that they have targeted the black and brown community.
I feel brown people are definitely, we're the number one target. A poor brown man is the number one target. And then I feel like everybody else is a target too. Even poor white people, even middle-class white people, because they don't know what they're putting in their kids' bodies.
They have pushed and marketed their garbage products on us. It really felt reminiscent of the drugs being dumped into the communities. These companies don't care about the people that they sell to any more than the drug dealers do. I wanted to know why white-owned companies like Popeyes market so heavily to black people.
Thank you for calling Popeyes headquarters. How can I direct your call?
Hello, my name is John Lewis. I'm recording for a documentary right now. I was wondering if you could connect me with somebody to talk to in regards to the fact that you are a white-founded, white-owned, and white-managed company that markets almost exclusively to black people. You think you can help me out with that?
The alcohol industries, fast food industries, tobacco industries target communities of color.
They target all of us. You know what I mean? But especially when you're in an impoverished neighborhood, you're super, super targeted.
The way that we eat can have a direct impact on our mental functioning.
The youth that I work with, they only have access to like fried food or fast food or just like junk food. If people are consuming that, they can't focus in the classroom, they can't be like high achieving students. They can fill those positions at the Burger King or the McDonald's, right? They don't need a college degree for that, you know? So that's intentional, right?
You know, starting from the children, the foods that they're eating in school lunches directly impact their ability to learn, directly impact behavior. Then they try to put them on medication. The medication has all kinds of side effects, and it's just like this vicious cycle.
You got kids addicted to fast food, addicted to sugar. So when you try to give them food that's good for them, they choose not to eat it.
It's just like, you know, selling crack to a crackhead. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. To the extent that it becomes addictive, because at that price point you can get a certain fix. So you get that escape.
You know, a lot of people think about unhealthy foods and often associate it with disease like cancer and high blood pressure, but it is something that directly affects the brain.
Food is going to affect consciousness.
The fact that we even have this idea of like a mind and a body, though they're separate entities, is really kind of bizarre. If it affects your body like that, how could it not affect your mind? It's like we don't get cut off at the neck.
The effects of sugar and the chemicals and artificial sweeteners on the brain. Our neurotransmitters are affected by all these chemicals, pesticides on our foods. Software. That's right, it's affecting the software.
How we eat affects how we act. So if I want to keep a certain culture down or doing stuff to each other or always mad, angry, poor this way, not thinking correctly, I can feed them dirty food, bad water, all that.
Stress is a silent killer, and I see that as a huge factor among African Americans who carry a lot of stress.
People who eat meat have higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol in their blood. According to one study, eating meat increases stress hormone levels higher than the stress of losing a spouse.
Animals experience hormones. They experience cortisol, which is like the stress hormone, and fear, and that is like a vibration, and it goes out into them. You know, just like serotonin, when you're happy, you're releasing serotonin into yourself. So think about those seconds before you die. You're releasing all that fear into the flesh, and then it's slaughtered, and then it's prepared for someone to consume. So you're consuming a vibration. You're consuming that fear, you're consuming that cortisol.
We know that there's a connection between our emotional and mental and physical. We know it, we just ignore it because it's easier to not pay attention to it.
That's the brainwash. You're eating it and you have no concept of this is the reason that you're sick.
These situations, first of all, are not happenstance, they don't just happen. I think that they're carefully orchestrated, and I think that they are the result of people who see an opportunity to exploit others.
The next thing you're going to ask me, do the cigarette companies know that their cigarettes are not healthy? Do the alcohol companies know that there's a problem? Of course they do. The food companies don't understand that what they're selling causes significant health compromise? Of course they know exactly what they're doing, but their job is to make as much money as possible.
We can see this was their kind of explicit motive to target these vulnerable communities, and so no wonder we see these kind of rates of disease because of the kind of junk that's being funneled, targeted, advertised in these kind of communities.
Communities of color not only have toxic food dumped in them, but also literal toxins. Hazardous waste sites like landfills, incinerators, and industrial factories are disproportionately located in communities of color, making African Americans 3 times more likely to die from pollution. In fact, Americans of color experience 63% more pollution than they even create themselves. A prime example of this is factory farms. factory farms, where most animals are raised, produce an obscene amount of pollution in the form of animal waste. Farm animals in the US produce 44 times more waste than humans, and virtually none of it is treated. North Carolina's pigs alone produce the waste equivalent of 60 million people. Enough feces and urine to fill 15,000 Olympic swimming pools every year. In factory hog farms, pigs are raised in giant warehouses. The waste they produce runs out into massive open air cesspools. The liquid feces and urine is then sprayed untreated onto fields, polluting the air, water, and surrounding community. And to no surprise, these operations are disproportionately located in communities of color.
When they started spraying animal waste right here, it came over here just like it was raining. Who blows animal waste on another person? You get a headache, you start gagging, you feel like you want to throw up, and the ammonia is attacking your eyes. And the more you breathe it in, the more it takes away your breath. And if you go inside, it's not as bad, but you can still smell it inside. There's no way you can keep the odor out.
Some folks from Johns Hopkins University came down and they did a study. They took these Q-tip swabs and they went inside people's homes. They swabbed the walls, they swabbed refrigerator tops, microwave tops, tabletop, couches, children's toys, coffee tables. Everywhere they swabbed, they found animal waste, and it was pig waste. We have almost 10 million pigs in the state. We have more pigs than people.
These are factories where you can have a building 500 feet long that has 22,000 chickens in it. You can have a building half that size that has 1,000, 1,500 hogs in it, all producing enormous amounts of waste. Where's that waste going to go? It goes into the environment, into the communities.
You go up this creek, and it's this CAFO's on both sides, and you see these ditches just running into the stream. It's just pure, straight hog waste running off these fields. We are drowning in animal waste in eastern North Carolina.
If the river's not healthy, people aren't healthy. If the people aren't healthy, probably something in the environment. The river is not healthy.
People are getting sicker here, they're dying earlier, they're staying sicker longer.
When you look at the impacts from these CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, whether it's hogs or it's poultry, they were strategically located in or near communities of color.
If you are African American in North Carolina, you're almost twice as likely as a white person to live within 3 miles of a swine CAFO. If you're Native American, you're more than 2 times as likely.
And so we call it environmental racism. We don't think that it was a mistake that these animals are being found in our community.
That's the thing about the legacy of race discrimination in this country. It's not happenstance that this industry is located in these areas.
We call it the avenue of least resistance. The industries perceive the people that have the least amount of economic and political power to fight them off.
The state has an obligation to rectify that. They have an obligation to stop permitting that.
Well, personally, when I started complaining, hog farmer came over and I was at the end of the road here mowing grass and he had a stick like he was going to hit me with it. And they came over here twice with a gun. They came over here and shook my mother around. She was sitting here in the living room and he went in and he grabbed onto a chair and started shaking her. And he cursed her and was telling her that he could do anything to me that he wanted to.
The pork industry is like the mafia to me because these industries have an awful lot of capital and they don't mind spreading it amongst our government. If you follow the money, you will find a lot of pork money up in our legislature. They do the dirty bidding for this industry.
The money that this industry pours into the legislature is real. Like, that's a real factor.
Stop electing these people. They don't care about you. They've shown that.
The pollution from factory farms doesn't stop in North Carolina. Raising animals for food is one of the leading causes of climate change, deforestation, water pollution, and species extinction around the world. I wanted to visit a pig farm for myself to see what all this shit was about.
I'm Tom Butler, and we're at Butler Farms in Harnett County, North Carolina. I'm a contract grower for Prestige Farms, and we have feeder to finished operation here, and we keep about 7,500 hogs here.
And would you say that smell that we're getting now, is that like an average or is that low or?
Yeah, it's strong today. It's strong today. Pretty strong.
Would you happen to know, like, a range of how far out the scent can go?
Well, I live probably a half a mile from here, and sometimes I can smell it as strong at my house as I do here.
Wow.
The lagoon odor, we've heard of people that said that they smelled the lagoon odor probably 3 miles away. So somebody that's not used to it, it's a little bit overwhelming. First big complaint I got was from a neighbor. He called me one night and said that the inside of his den smelled like hog poop.
What is exactly under here right now?
6 million gallons of pig poop
Wow.
and sludge.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is actually a spray field. That's a spray field. And we put out about 3.5 million gallons of waste each season. On this farm, we collect 6,000 tons of CO2 and methane each year.
Tom's farm produces the same amount of CO2 pollution as 800 homes.
If you want to go inside, I would recommend putting on some clothes.
Okay.
Because you'll smell bad.
Stepping into the shed, I was overwhelmed by the smell. It was nauseating, and honestly, it smelled like death. Being protected from head to toe and seeing the animals covered in each other's wastes, crowded together, realizing that 97% of all pigs are raised the same way, made me think back to all the pork sandwiches, ham, bacon, sausage, and hot dogs I had ever eaten had come from a farm just like this.
When they poop, it just goes right down into the cracks, and then we flush it once a week, one time a week.
Okay. Do you ever like spray this down, or just it automatically just kind of washes it down itself?
We wash it once every 20 weeks. Hogs in a CAFO environment is much more manageable. It has issues like with disease and crowding and this type of thing, and we know that can cause the superbug issue, where they have a bug that antibiotics do not have any effect on them.
Tom's openness about his farming industry was shocking, but nothing was as shocking as what he said sitting in his office after taking off his mic.
This is a traditional tobacco farm, and I spent the first half of my life killing people with nicotine and tobacco, and I've spent the second half of my life up until now killing people with pathogens, polluted groundwater from hog farms.
It's crazy.
As far as I know, that being unethical or acting in an unbusinesslike manner, it's not illegal. It's not against the law, but it's just commonplace now what we do.
Tom's callousness showed a total disregard for life in general, not only for the health of the residents of the surrounding communities, consumers, and animals confined in these sheds, but also the individuals that have to work in these factories.
The workers at the slaughterhouses or factory farms, and many of them are immigrants who don't have a legal permit to work in the country, so they are very vulnerable. They are paid lowest wages, and they are very exposed, and they cannot really speak up for the treatment that they suffer. In some slaughterhouses, they even have to wear diapers because they cannot even take breaks to go to the bathroom. It's no surprise that many slaughterhouse workers become desensitized, or they have other problems, psychological problems after that. They also become more prone to be violent to other humans as well. These people are poorly treated, and they are just also victims of these systems. Most workers who work there they are working in these places because they have no other options.
Some of those with no other options are people locked up in prisons. Some slaughterhouses and meat processing facilities use imprisoned people as labor. People serving time for nonviolent crimes can be forced to violently kill, dismember, and butcher hundreds of animals every day.
It's really mentally disturbing as far as what you're dealing with. They really wanted me to get on the saw and saw the cow in half. A lot of people got sick working there, I guess because from the blood, and it's like bloody everywhere, so really a real health hazard kind of place, you know what I mean? Once they give you a job, you have no choice but to work it. I don't think it helped you better yourself, I don't really think you have a person to better themselves by doing things like that. This is a social justice issue. Yes, I really believe, and I know in my heart that it is.
The history of prison labor being linked to violent industries doesn't end with slaughterhouses, though. Incarcerated people's labor has been used to make military uniforms, body armor for combat, police uniforms, and McDonald's uniforms. African Americans are disproportionately wrongly convicted, charged, and sentenced to more severe punishments than their white counterparts for the same exact crimes, filling private businesses disguised as prisons with predominantly people of color. These prisons lease or contract out imprisoned people to private companies to make the uniforms for the very same system that put them there. It has been argued that this is nothing more than modern-day slavery. The filthy conditions of these slaughterhouses and factory farms that people are forced to work in are perfect breeding grounds for disease. Factory farm workers are more likely to be infected with respiratory and immune-compromising illnesses that can spread to the entire community.
And it's actually, at the moment, it's a crisis because in these farms, they utilize, for instance, antibiotics to make the animals grow for production. In fact, today, the animal farms are consuming more antibiotics than antibiotics are consumed in American hospitals.
In fact, close to 80% of all antibiotics sold in the U.S. are fed to farm animals. Not only is this creating dangerous, untreatable infections like MRSA, but superbug viruses as well. Most of the world's killer pandemics have come from raising and eating animals. The 2009 swine flu pandemic that killed over 500,000 people around the world originated from a pig farm in North Carolina. The most recent pandemic, COVID-19, which originated from eating animals as well, has disproportionately killed African Americans. African Americans are over 3.5 times more likely to die from coronavirus than white Americans. Indigenous communities are being particularly hard hit. At the time of making this film, half of all COVID-19 deaths in New Mexico were Native people. But this isn't the first time. The history of Western livestock diseases is responsible for killing over 56 million indigenous people in the Americas through smallpox, avian flu, measles, and more. It has even been purported that these animal diseases were used as biological weapons to kill Native people with smallpox-infected blankets. Europeans not only inflicted new diseases on indigenous people, but they also forced their European diet and foods on colonized populations, perhaps the most egregious being dairy.
Historically, we know the Europeans brought over the cows, the chickens, the wheat, all things not native to the land, and imposed this way of cooking, right? You go to any chef school, it's always French-based, which is dairy.
The single most problematic food that I see in practice is the consumption of dairy products.
Dairy products are not a food group.
Cow's milk, which is what most of us are talking about when we're having dairy, is made for a baby cow. And if you aren't a baby cow, then it is not a perfectly designed food for you.
It never made sense for me, like why we would drink a cow's milk and not a human's. I just don't logically understand that.
Dairy products are a collection of compounds that people can ingest, but they are no more of a food group for humans than tobacco. You can choose to ingest tobacco, but you don't need it, and it's not good for you. And the same is true of dairy foods.
In fact, dairy is linked to quite a few health harms, including heart disease, stroke, a variety of cancers, and it's linked to autoimmune disease, as well as a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms like gas or bloating for people who are what we used to call lactose intolerant.
Prior to the mid-1960s, people thought lactose intolerance was a disease. And in 1966, researchers went to the Maryland House of Correction, and they tested white prisoners and black prisoners. And what they found is in the whites, lactose intolerance, very rare. In the African Americans, very common. And it wasn't just African Americans, it was Asian Americans, Native Americans, everybody other than Caucasians had a very high rate of lactose intolerance.
It's actually the normal state of things for most of the world to actually not be able to process lactose.
And yet we're still pushing it and we're still talking about it as though it's a small problem. If you are eating something that you are not able to digest, that's a problem. That's not going to be good for you. We shouldn't be saying you need milk at every meal if you can't digest milk.
There's something really insidious about the way that government agencies are promoting and pushing dairy in particular.
Wait a second. What about the majority of communities of color that can't even digest it?
African Americans being 75 to 80% lactose intolerant. East Asians, somewhere around 90%. Indigenous Americans, even higher, up to 95%.
I think we're so used to the disruption that dairy causes in us that people are just kind of like, well, you know, I get a little bubbly in the stomach, or I have gas for 5 hours. I'm like, that's a problem. You shouldn't be doing that. So
dairy is the worst. Dairy's almost worse than meat. It's so awful. It's one of the cruelest industries on the planet. Your dairy is factory farmed. It is mass produced.
Without question, it's our most important food, containing phosphorus and calcium that build healthy bones and teeth. And thanks to modern dairy science, these elements are made more valuable by the addition of vitamin D.
Dairy foods have never been shown to improve bone health. In fact, in the Harvard Nurses' Health Study, the women who consumed the most dairy products had the highest risk for hip fracture.
We know that dairy is a high risk factor in prostate cancer, for instance. It's also the #1 source of saturated fat in the American diet, which is, of course, a strong risk factor for heart disease.
When we eat animal foods, there's a lot of hormones there.
Dairy foods are very high in estrogens.
Estrogen that your body doesn't make, we call that exogenous estrogen. It attaches to hormone receptors in the body. So which tissues have hormone receptors? Breast, prostate, ovary, uterus. Those hormones attach to those tissues and it makes things grow.
The proteins in milk are often associated with aggravating many of the inflammatory conditions and allergic conditions. High blood pressure, diabetes, autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, ankylosing spondylitis, asthma, eczema, psoriasis, as well as some forms of cancer, including lymphoma.
The schools, the school districts, everybody has an economic incentive to force kids to take and drink dairy-based milk.
A kid who might be lactose intolerant, and he says, I can't drink milk. Could I get an alternative to milk? The answer is nope. You take the cow's milk. That's it. Federal law says he is not allowed to have an alternative, and they are not allowed to offer him an alternative unless he brings a note from a parent or a physician saying he's got a medical condition. It's totally normal to be lactose intolerant, and those kids should be able to drink something that won't make them sick all afternoon.
How can this still be happening? After all this time, how is this still going on? But it is.
We have seen how the government makes a lot of money off of partnering with, remember the whole Got Milk campaign? We all know that drinking a cow's milk is not good for you, right? And that you can get calcium from other sources. It doesn't have to be from cow's milk. And I don't even know what that is. It's disgusting.
Now, they tell you that the government's out there to protect you, and they have strict rules that say that, milk products can't have no more than 750,000 pus cells per cc. I guess if there was more than that, it'd be like pure pus. I think that drinking milk essentially is like finding a festering wound on a cow and sticking a straw in it and sucking.
Makes you just want to puke thinking about it.
So the single biggest advice I give to patients, #1 on the list, is stop the use of dairy products.
It's important for people to recognize that not only do we not need to drink milk, but we can actually get all of the nutrients that we might find from milk from healthier sources, namely plant foods.
I can't stress this enough. Dairy foods have never been shown to improve bone health. But what's even worse is that African American women are genetically protected from getting osteoporosis anyway. So even the #1 alleged benefit of dairy foods doesn't even accrue to African American women. So they're being encouraged to eat these foods for absolutely no benefit whatsoever.
That's just a classic of kind of institutional racism within the, nutritional world.
There's no other word to describe what is happening when a government agency knows that something is harmful for a group of people, pushes that product on them anyway. That is injustice. That is racism, plain and simple.
Systemic racism plagues virtually every facet of our society. Before we even have a choice about food, we are up against terrible odds. Black babies have 2 times the infant mortality rate as white babies, and our mothers are 4 times more likely to die from childbirth. If you don't believe that racism plays a role in this, black newborns are 3 times more likely to die when cared for by white doctors than when cared for by black doctors. By contrast, the mortality rate of white babies is largely unaffected by the doctor's race.
Mortality rates at birth for black women is through the roof, and that's because of the poor treatment that's given We're not given proper aftercare at all. We die often at home after the birth without giving proper instructions or follow-up, and just in the hospital often. And that's just par for the course.
No wonder why so many African Americans have distrust for the medical system. The Tuskegee study, carried out by the U.S. government from 1932 to 1972, is one of the most infamous forms of medical racism in U.S. history. Researchers allowed hundreds of black men to suffer needlessly for decades and die in agony, depriving them of proven and effective medical treatments in order to study the long-term effects of untreated syphilis in black men. This was a government-sanctioned study to literally watch sick black people die. And this wasn't that long ago. African Americans' rightful distrust of doctors has led to people being less likely to seek early medical treatment or avoid hospitals altogether. Americans of color are also painfully aware that a doctor's white coat doesn't cover up the legacy of racial inequality in the medical system.
So it's if you make it through the birth process, then we start with the garbage food, and then we start with the other things that are gonna catch you up one way or the other.
It's about money over people's health.
We are consuming a diet that is built around animal foods, not because they're the healthiest foods to eat, but it's because they are foods that are produced so that people can make money.
Today, half of the American population is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Half.
Diabetes means there's too much sugar in the blood. The sugar we're talking about is glucose. Glucose is a good thing. Glucose powers your muscles, powers your brain, powers all of you. And the problem in diabetes is that the glucose, the sugar, is staying in the blood and insulin isn't doing its job. Insulin is the hormone that's supposed to get the sugar into the cell. It's not working.
In the case of diabetes, we know that an excessively high-fat diet can contribute to insulin resistance.
Cheese and dairy products, that's the #1 source of saturated fat that drives cholesterol levels up. Right behind it is meat. Meat is the #2 source of saturated fat.
When you eat animal protein, animal fats, it decreases the effectiveness of insulin.
If you look at type 2 diabetics, they have more, not less insulin, but it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because there's insulin resistance. Obesity certainly is associated with diabetes, and reducing obesity is a desirable goal, but ultimately comes back to controlling what you put in your mouth.
You know, I talk to my uncles, and they're like, I grew up on McDonald's, and I grew up on ribs, and this and that. And it's like, okay, and that's why you lost your leg two months ago from diabetes, because of that. But they don't equate one to the other.
It's rare that you go into some black kid's house and there isn't an uncle in the back room with his leg cut off that you never see. It's not often that I meet someone that doesn't have it or doesn't have someone in their family that has it or someone that died from it. You know, 1 out of 3 people is supposed to have it in the next 10 years. It's a very common thing.
African Americans are 2 times more likely to end up blind or visually impaired due to diabetes, 2.3 times more likely to lose a lower limb, and 3.5 times more likely to end up on dialysis than whites because of diabetes complications.
Obviously, once you end up with a leg amputation or kidney failure or heart disease from your diabetes, you're going to lose an average of 17 years of life.
When I learned that I was diabetic, type 2 diabetic, I was losing my vision in my left eye. I had permanent nerve damage in my hands and feet. My right thigh had serious nerve damage. I had an ulcer. Cholesterol was through the roof. High blood pressure. The black package. We know the song.
Yeah. So the complications of diabetes are really awful, any one of which would be awful. In aggregate are truly awful. So blindness, impotence, amputations, kidney failure, heart attacks, strokes. But getting your blood sugar down with diet and lifestyle, you can prevent all of those horrible complications.
Your diabetes is not caused by a metformin deficiency. It's caused by food. And we've got to tackle the food part of this.
Eating just 1 serving of processed meat a day increases your risk of developing type 2 diabetes by 51%. No other food comes even close to that. Dr. Neil Barnard and colleagues conducted multiple peer-reviewed replicated studies showing that when people suffering from type 2 diabetes remove animal products from their diet and replace them with whole fruits and vegetables, they were able to reverse the disease.
When you go on a whole foods plant-based diet, your body becomes more insulin sensitive. You can reverse type 2 diabetes. You need less and less insulin or other drugs like that. And under your doctor's supervision, most people can reduce or oftentimes get off of insulin altogether.
About 80% of our type 2 diabetics will be able to achieve normal blood sugar levels without the use of medication. They can re-establish health and maintain health.
3 weeks, my vision totally cleared up. In 3 months, the ulcer went away, my nerve damage went away, my cholesterol went from a 217 to a 57, my A1C went from a 17 down to a 5.7, a pre-diabetic level. No medicine, all food, healthy food, good food, and it was the realization, it was an aha moment that it was not my DNA, it was my dinner.
Untreated diabetes also causes heart disease. Cardiovascular disease is still the #1 killer, despite all of the research, despite all the procedures and all of the information that's been out about cardiovascular disease.
So cardiovascular disease, combination of heart attacks and strokes caused by stiffening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, which is caused by the standard American diet and lifestyle.
In heart disease, there are atherosclerotic plaques in the arteries.
Plaque refers to the buildup of cholesterol particles and other inflammatory particles inside of our blood vessels. So not only is the blood flow blocked as that plaque grows inside the blood vessel, but the plaque itself can rupture.
One of the bumps breaks open, that triggers a blood clot. That's all it takes to stop the blood flow through that artery. And everything downstream gets no blood flow, no oxygen, the heart muscle there dies. If this happens in your brain, the part of the brain dies.
That's still the #1 killer and what we should be really concentrating on, because for some reason we're not doing better with that. And it's probably one of the easier diseases to treat. All these diseases are symptoms. When your blood pressure goes up high, it's not, okay, the disease is high blood pressure. It's a symptom. Your body is trying to tell you, there's something that's not right here.
High blood pressure, as we've talked about, is one of the leading contributing causes of death and disability. It's so ubiquitous that the majority of people, by the time they reach 65, have high blood pressure, and it's a preventable and treatable illness.
So wait a second, if most of us over age 60 have high blood pressure, maybe it's not a disease, more just a natural inevitable consequence of aging. But no, we've known for nearly a century now. 2 years at this rural Kenyan hospital, 1,800 patients were admitted in one study. How many cases of high blood pressure did they find? 0. Wow, they must have had low rates of heart disease. No, they had no rates of heart disease. Not a single case of arteriosclerosis was found. So we've known that there is not epidemic heart disease among people that are centering their diets around plants, but you don't know its cause and effect until you put it to the test. When researchers took people with heart disease and put them on the kind of plant-based diet followed by populations that did not get epidemic heart disease, their hope was, say, maybe we could slow the disease down a little bit, maybe even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. As soon as people stopped eating artery-clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery. Look, if that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the #1 killer of men and women, shouldn't that be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that it can also be so effective in preventing, arresting, or reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming.
My own uncle suffered a heart attack and passed away. It shook my family to the core losing him too young, and the thought that his heart disease was a treatable condition hurts even more. If eating plant-based can reverse the world's major killer diseases, why aren't we hearing more doctors talk about it?
In medical school, it's all about the basic physiology of the disease and then medications, and nutrition has really been overlooked. Now, that would have been defensible if it weren't for the fact that nutrition is the single biggest factor in causing the diseases that we're dealing with.
Physicians suffer from a nutrition deficiency in education. They just weren't taught about the power that food can have on these chronic lifestyle diseases.
Nutrition is not emphasized at all in medical training. And not only is it not taught, but it's not part of the paradigm of Western medicine, frankly.
If you look at how doctors get their information, it's through continuing medical education, almost all of which is bankrolled by the pharmaceutical industry. They don't make a dime if you're healthy. They don't make a dime if your disease goes away. They make money if you are sick and stay sick.
There's no money in wellness. It's money in keeping people sick.
If you look at most of the sales of things that go across the cash register at the drugstore, it's for things that are not designed to cure the disease. They're designed to manage it. So let me get you on medications for your diabetes and you'll never come off them. Let me get you on medications for your cholesterol. You'll never come off it. medications for your high blood pressure. You'll never come off them. That's the idea.
And the reason the doctor knows they'll be on drugs the rest of their life is because the doctor's guaranteeing that if they do what they're told, they'll never get well. They'll be sick forever.
If taking a pill solved our problems, we would be living the longest because we consume almost half of the world's pharmaceutical drugs. Yet 39, 40, 41 other countries live longer than us. Taking the pill is not the answer. Can it be used as a tool, especially short term? I'm for that. But there has to be a game plan to get it off. And there has to be justification for it.
The cure is not lucrative for anyone. Keeping people sick is very lucrative.
There's the diabetes machine where it's just a money-making machine, and once you start here, you never get out of it.
The hundreds of millions of dollars that are made on insulin, the hundreds of millions of dollars that are made on the test strips, when you start to just add up all of this money that's associated with this crisis.
Yeah, the pharmaceutical companies making billions of dollars. No one's getting better, everybody's getting sicker. They getting richer, the community's getting poorer.
So of course they're not going to talk about it because it is set up to keep you sick.
There's no money in curing people, but cures exist.
They don't want a healthy population.
Now you want pills, you want medicine, you want dialysis. Everybody's getting paid, except you. You hurting.
Your health is not their main priority. They trying to keep you sick.
Big pharma and pharmaceutical companies are making billions of dollars off of all of us.
The government is involved, the educational system is involved, the pharmaceutical, the medical industry, all of it.
The pharmaceutical industry spends more money on lobbying the government than any other industry. In 2018, out of 535 U.S. representatives, only 21 didn't accept money from pharmaceutical companies. The U.S. is one of only 2 countries in the world that allows pharmaceutical companies to advertise to consumers. No wonder we consume close to half of all prescription drugs, while being only 5% of the world's population. Not only do we consume more, we pay more. Americans are charged on average 300% more for medications than the world average. We're charged 5.5 times more for insulin drugs, over 200 times more for cholesterol drugs, and over 260 times more for blood pressure meds, making healthcare in the US the most expensive in the world.
You don't have to say it's a conspiracy to see that it's a conspiracy. And then when you look at the numbers and the communities that are impacted, you clearly show that there is a reason we are not doing anything to stop this crisis.
Hospitals, doctors, and the pharmaceutical industry are all profiting billions of dollars off of our people getting sick, while the junk and fast food industries are making billions making us sick. It seems like they're all working together. In fact, they are. Jeff Kindler, the former CEO of Pfizer, the largest pharmaceutical company in the world, was also the executive vice president of McDonald's. 3 of McDonald's active board members have direct ties to pharma. Miles White, executive chairman of the pharmaceutical company Abbott Laboratories. Lloyd Dean, the board of pharmaceutical brand Upjohn Company. Robert Eckert, director of biomedical company Amgen. Coca-Cola's senior vice president, chief innovation officer Robert Long, started off at Procter & Gamble. Kelly Johnstone, vice president, strategic security at Coca-Cola, comes from the FDA. PepsiCo board member Daniel Visaya is chairman of pharma company Novartis. Cargill, one of the world's largest meat companies' board members include Bernard Passat, former president of pharma company Wyeth Laboratories. Richard Anderson of Medtronic, the world's largest medical device company that generates most of its profits from the U.S. healthcare system. Stephen Hamsley, former CEO of United Health Group, a health insurance provider and the 5th largest corporation in the USA. And this is just the beginning. Companies providing life and health insurance own over $1.9 billion worth of stock in the fast food industry, investing in the very food making people sick, and then charging higher premiums to customers who end up with diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease from these same foods. This isn't just greedy corporations, though. The head of the U.S. government's Department of Health and Human Services, responsible for setting federal dietary guidelines for all Americans, is Alex Azar, who was the senior executive for pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly. If this isn't a conspiracy to keep people sick, why on earth would fast food junk meat companies want pharmaceutical board members when these industries have apparently nothing in common? They want to keep us sick. It's like they're trying to kill us.
It's all tied in. The drug companies, food are the biggest contributors to the health crisis. It works together. If you keep eating bullshit, then you're gonna keep needing pharmaceuticals. I think they call it the Food and Drug Administration. You know, that's the people in charge of it, right?
This is just the issue of our government being greedy, the food industry being greedy, the food industry being connected to the pharmaceutical industry, knowing, hey, I'm gonna feed them this, they're gonna be screwed up, you my man, they're gonna come see you for this medicine later, we're gonna keep it loopy, we got a bunch of money coming back and forth.
It's like, you tear down their bodies and send them to us. We'll take it from there.
They setting your ass up to take the bait. Your death is not an expense to them, it's an expense to you. They're just capitalizing off of you.
It's all about control, money, and survival to them.
As long as they can make that dollar, they don't care if you live or die.
These huge pharmaceutical companies are, again, incentivizing these doctors to push these pills.
We are such a capitalist country that we don't actually care about the health of the people here.
They get rich, and you and your whole family die slow. That's just the game.
We're not gonna tell you to change how you eat. We're just gonna give you pills to wash it over, like Novocaine, to kind of ease you into this slow death. They're killing us.
It's kind of like the dope game. It is the dope game. It's just a bigger gangster, the mob boss.
I used to sell drugs. I'm a former gang member. I used to be a part of a gang called the Four Corner Hustlers, west side of Chicago. I'm also a former executive. I worked in the healthcare system for a $9 billion company where I developed the business deals between the health system and the payer system, which is basically the bukas of the world. The more you keep people sick, the better and the higher you can receive funding from insurance payers to government assisted programs. There's no money in the cure, it's money in just to keep people maintaining. And that's when you know that's a problem, when it's becoming more based off of trying to keep people sick in the system. And I found that very problematic.
There's already a cycle that's set on profiting off of the sickness, and they don't want to disturb that status quo.
Because they are knowingly killing people.
While you're alive, we'll make money off of you, and eventually we'll kill you all.
They trying to get everything they can get out of you before they kill you.
And I'm gonna keep it real with you. They don't give a fuck about you. You're so expendable.
They're killing us and they don't give a fuck.
They try to kill us in everything. From the police, the food, the education. We're not gonna give you good education. We're not even gonna fix the water and flood.
There's been warfare against the African American community on a chemical level, on food level.
Study the numbers and you'll understand that they're trying to kill us.
You put drugs in the communities, you put guns in the communities, you put disease in the communities, you put poor food in the communities. All these things are designed to shorten your life expectancy.
Yeah, they're trying to kill us.
It's intentional that it's happening in the poorest of communities. It's intentional that it's happening in communities of color.
The powers that be that are making that money at the top, they trying to kill us.
Is it a race thing? Is it a population thing? Is it a money thing? I honestly feel like it's all three rolled into one big, ugly, greasy ball and put on a bun and served to you. Yeah.
I had enough. I was literally and figuratively fed up with all of this. I grew up as an overweight kid. I was 315 pounds as a freshman in high school. I dealt with the bullying, and I was on a path for debilitating diseases and premature death. But when I found out my mom's colon cancer was directly linked to animal protein consumption, that was it for me. Like Maya Angelou said, once you know better, you have to do better. Not wanting to get a diagnosis like this or be on pills my whole life, I stopped eating all meat and quickly quit dairy and eggs too. Having a lifetime indoctrination to meat and junk food marketing, I thought that my health and performance was going to suffer. But that was far from the case.
My name is Torrey Washington. I am an IFBB Pro competitor. I've achieved medals and pro cards within various organizations.
I was hearing a lot of things about how plant-based diets cut down on recovery time, help with inflammation in your body. Basically, I was looking for a competitive advantage.
As a professional athlete, nutrition is the most important. Before, I would just eat anything to get full. But then once I started to understand the correlation between the food I ate and my performance, then I started to change and modify the way that I ate in order for my preparation for the competition.
During training camp was when I really noticed that I wasn't as sore as I usually would be.
And tell you the truth, when I first went plant-based, I didn't want to tell nobody. I felt like I was cheating. I felt like I had the cheat code. Probably like 3-4 weeks it went by and I'm training, I'm on the court and I'm going hard. And after I work out every day, I wasn't putting ice on my knees. And I told my brother, I was like, yo, I've been forgetting the ice. And then it was like, oh, it ain't that I'm forgetting, I don't need it. I don't need it.
If you do your research and you're accountable every day to the foods that you have to eat and how often you have to eat throughout the day to maintain your caloric intake, then you shouldn't have an issue.
And as an athlete, they always tell you protein, you gotta have it.
Protein is always a thing.
We've been fed this propaganda that you have to eat meat and dead flesh to get your protein.
It's what sources that you use to get it. So beans, tofu, fruits, vegetables, protein is everywhere.
Some of the biggest animals in the world, they eat fruits and vegetables, and they're absolutely massive.
Educate yourself. You know, there's great food out there, and it's easy if you just kind of get your mind out of your comfort zone a little bit and just explore it.
When you introduce things like plants and herbs, things that have life to it, it gives you life, which is why we've been able, to do the things that we've done in terms of healing.
I had knee problems, I had fractures, inflammation, plantar fasciitis, anemia, early signs of osteoporosis, which was osteopenia, all this stuff going on, gout, what? And I was doing everything I was told was healthy. All that stuff is gone now by being vegan.
I perform, I dance and all of that, and I have tendonitis in both knees, like pretty bad, to the point where after rehearsals, my knees would be so swollen I couldn't bend my legs, like bad. Within 2 weeks of just no meat, no dairy, period. I just cut it all out. 2 weeks, it's like there was nothing ever wrong. A plant-based diet will not only reduce the inflammation, but almost reverse the effects.
So I was 240 pounds. Eczema, sinusitis, post-nasal drip, a bunch of ailments. So as I just started eating healthy and incorporating more things in my diet, I felt much better. And then on top of that, I had a horrible temper, like extremely bad temper. And that was the most, I would say, even out of all the physical ailments, for me, spiritually, that was the best thing about the clean diet. It was able to kind of reverse my temperament.
I know personally, when I cut out meat and chicken and cheese, I am just a happier person.
I used to get the flu every quarter. You can count on it. I haven't had a real sickness since 1998, literally. And that made me learn that we was eating the flu. We wasn't just catching the flu. They make you be like, you catching this, you catching that, you caught a cold, you ate it. I changed my eating and I became vegan because of the values I held. And with that came the added benefit of having more energy, being lighter on my feet. I became vegan, I lost like 30 pounds, Like we trying to go the other way now, you know what I mean?
I could wake up and go to school a little bit better. Like I had more energy. My eyesight got a little bit better. It's dope, I'm straight. I could stick with it because I felt better. That's why I stuck with it. I was like, whoa.
I felt a huge change in the way my body functioned. Mucus building factors of dairy products were just gone. My sinuses got better. My skin cleared even more.
You don't wake up in the morning with just random aches and pains like you did before. And then when you cut it out and you wake up and you go, oh, wait a minute. That's when you realize, like, okay, I've literally been poisoning myself for the last, I don't know how many years.
When people switch to a plant-based diet, within a matter of a week or 2 or 3, they start to notice their weight's starting to come off, their energy's better, their digestion's better, and then when they roll up their sleeve and you draw a blood sample, their blood sugar is better, their cholesterol is coming down, their blood pressure is better. All of these things are improving. And if anything, you're taking them off their medicines.
A woman in her 50s from Mexico came to me with type 2 diabetes, and her sugar was extremely high. And now, on a plant-based diet, her diabetes is completely gone. She is living with normal blood sugar and eating a diet that's rich in carbohydrates and plant foods and doing amazing without any medication.
No one ever mentions mentally. Like I felt more clear-minded, you know what I mean? I felt more clear-minded and physically. I was more than 10 pounds lighter as a vegan, and then I beat my deadlift record. So it's like, after that happened, I was like, oh.
I'm a creative and we need like our mental space to be clear. And like one of the things that I found affected me in a positive way was just the way I was thinking and the way I was approaching, tasks. And, again, not dragging my feet.
So I'm getting all the protein I need, I have all the energy that I need, but I don't have to deal with any of the negativity that comes with flesh digesting flesh.
I was living a regular rap lifestyle, smoking weed all the time, getting drunk, stressed, frustrated, eating burgers and hot dogs and all this stuff, and woke up one morning with gout in my 20s in my leg. And long story short, I found out how my lifestyle contributed to that. And then I started just thinking about my uncles and people in my family, everybody going through that same shit. And I wanted to break that cycle because, my mom has diabetes and my pops had 3 heart attacks. My brother been addicted to crack cocaine for almost 20 years. Having family values based on health and wellness is a revolution in our family lineage. For my sons, they grew up plant-based, working out, martial arts, drinking filtered water and no Kool-Aid and all that. Just giving them a green foundation to build from has been what I consider a victory against all of the systematic setup against our culture.
It was in prison that I discovered plant-based eating. I just absolutely created this mantra for myself that if it requires harm, then nah, I don't want anything to do with it. And that included me going back into my community to sell drugs. That included me putting anything in my body related to poison or negative energy, anything like that. And I just couldn't contribute to an industry that was destroying over 50 billion farm animals per year. So I denounced it. I stopped eating meat then and there. Meat has always been associated with being very masculine, being very brave. And that's so far from the truth.
This whole masculinity in meat they've been put together to sell a product in order to keep people eating more meat.
All you need to tell men, can't get it up, give up meat, because you're going to the minute that you do.
Being plant-based is the most exciting because when you discover something, you're so hyped. Because literally they make things that taste exactly like burgers, and it seems like it's only getting better.
Historically, when you hear about vegan food, people always say, oh, that's nasty, that's too fresh, it don't have no seasoning, right? So when I created Slutty Vegan, it really came from the idea that I was hungry and I wanted some vegan comfort food. So the mission of Slutty Vegan is to really help people, especially people who look like me and you, to reimagine food. You come to Slutty Vegan for the experience. You notice now that more people, especially Black people, are transitioning to a more healthier lifestyle.
I get so much gratitude from customers that come in that are not necessarily plant-based, because we are a plant-based restaurant, vegan. And for those people that come in and enjoy the food and rave about it, I get a lot of satisfaction. And for those people that ultimately transition.
You can keep your culture. Absolutely. You can keep those same traditions, just change it up. And I think that's maybe a fear a lot of vegans is, I'm not gonna be able to eat this anymore. Well, you shouldn't be eating it in the first place, right?
When it comes to the Black families and tradition, they think they're gonna lose something. They think, you're gonna take away our tradition. No, it's not taking it away. We can still have every single thing because it's the celebration of food, right? We still do the same celebration, it's just the food that changes. The tradition doesn't change, it's just the food. Honey, I still have greens, I still have mac and cheese, pinto beans, cornbread, right? If I want some fake turkey, I'll put that out there too, because it's my business. But I think you're taking something away from me, but actually I'm giving you something. Maybe a couple extra years, maybe less pain, and maybe a new conversation for dinner.
Anything that we do is to inspire people to live a healthier lifestyle.
The reason I actually write cookbooks is I'm trying to improve us. I know what we are dealing with as a community. I know the impact, like the public health crisis that our community is dealing with. Let's do this together. Let's lock arms. Let's figure this out, in concert.
On this journey, I met incredible people working to solve food justice issues, like veganic farmer Eugene Cook, building food production gardens in underserved communities in Atlanta.
Vegan is a choice of highest nutrition, and again, of realizing that we all are living on the same planet. And most of us are going to eat what is convenient. And what's more convenient than having food close to where you live?
It's the fastest food you can get.
It's the fastest food you can get, and to have fruit trees in your front yard is going to engender a better habit, because as you move around your space, you're gonna be more likely to eat food that's raw. As you said, an apple is vegan.
Yeah. Because I was using food justice activism, you know, really on the front line. And I was like, you know what, I needed to do more than just protest. I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna start growing some food, I'm gonna get into schools, so I'm gonna drop some music, I'm gonna drop some seeds, we're gonna, you know, show up, you know what I mean? So the whole idea around agronomy, permaculture in the urban communities is basically to lower the carbon emission, at the same time create cooperative economics and address some of those health disparities we already know.
You know, it was a scary time, and I just kept thinking, oh wow, all these businesses are gonna shut down, and there's gonna be all these people who need food. Why don't we combine that and help these plant-based restaurants get that food and feed it to people in need? It'd be like this win-win-win because we help the people, help the restaurant, and help the planet.
I met up with Benny Vegan, a business owner who's feeding kids healthy meals for free around the country.
So about 6 years ago, we fed 100 kids in Compton, California. That's how I started it. We're gonna feed kids. It's a taco bowl. I want you to try that, man. I'm gonna give you something to take home, but I want you to try that. We welcomed everybody in, giving them goji berries, Brazil nuts, you know, we made salads, we made smoothies. I was like, wow, like this is a purpose. The goal is to just plant a seed.
I really appreciate when people say, you know, it's not black people who need to change, we need to change.
Yeah,
we are the problem,
exactly, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and we've set up this oppressive system. We have set up this nutrition desert, and we have to devote our lives to changing it. And society as a whole has to realize it's a problem that we all have to address. You know, healthy food, why is that like not a given?
Claude and I always kind of discussed, you know, trying to figure out a way to play a part in figuring out the solution. And so we said to ourselves, what do we put healthy vending machines in the schools? And every time we went to a school, we were like, man, y'all are poisoning these kids, man. Y'all are killing these kids. Let me get you the stats right now. You literally are killing these kids. What you gonna do about that? And we walked out of there with the contract. Our mission was trying to make kids healthy, right? And you would think that everybody embraced it, but there are people standing in the way of that. We got a few other contracts, and then the soft drink companies decided, you know, they didn't really like that, right?
When we first took like Venice High School and like Monroe High School, Granada Hills, these are 3 major schools. And when we took those contracts, that was real money. And Coke VP flew out and said, look, you take another school and we're gonna unleash our entire sales force on you and say, hey, we're gonna destroy your company and come see you.
He coming all honest with it. I was trying to hold back the punches, but yeah, they came like that. Right. That's how they came for us.
That's how like the politics of just snuffing this stuff out happens.
Food activist Paige Butler broke down for me the misconception that eating healthy and plant-based had to be expensive.
Like a gallon of low fat is $3.99, and then a gallon over here is $2.99. So you're saving money, right? I don't want to hear that it's expensive.
Do you hear that a lot?
I hear that all the time. So here it is. I wanted to point out some of the savings that you can grab with frozen fruit. When things are in season, that's the best time to buy, just for flavor and price. But frozen fruit, you're saving money and you're not compromising on freshness because they're frozen at the peak of freshness. Right. So all those things, all those nutrients, they're still in there. And this is easy to throw in a smoothie. You can defrost these. These are a snack. Huge money saving tip for fruits and for veggies. Yeah. That's $2.19. This serves 2, and how many does this serve?
About 50 servings. About
50 servings. And then you just throw in some beans. Like, don't tell me this is expensive. This is our organic produce. This is always good and preferred, but if this is out of reach financially, you can still be eating healthy. When you're eating plant-based, it's a savings in itself because you just are passing all of this. And the bulk of your spending is normally on animal products for the most part. A lot of people always say that, you know, plant-based meat, it's more expensive, but here you go, $4.99, $7.99, right?
After learning all this information, how could I not change? Switching to a vegan diet changed my life. I felt a new vitality I hadn't experienced since I was a kid. My performance in the gym increased, and I put on muscle in a whole new way. At 43 years old, I feel younger now than I did at 23. Beyond all the personal benefits from switching my lifestyle, I couldn't help but imagine what the world would look like if we all ate this way. Because this system doesn't just affect Black people. We could take the power back from these greedy corporations and reclaim our health and communities. the billions of dollars we collectively spend on healthcare could stay in our families and build generational wealth. Half of the world's grain, which is now fed to livestock, could instead feed the 800 million starving and malnourished people around the planet. We could reverse climate change by getting rid of animal agriculture entirely and allow forests to grow back. We could prevent new pandemics from emerging from the factory farms. We could stop industries from polluting our air, water, land, and food. We could literally save the world and ourselves. I know it may seem hard, but I can tell you that as a black man surviving in America, going vegan doesn't even come close to the hardest thing I've ever done. I know the systemic changes need to happen in our policies and laws, but we can't wait on the government. Most of us can start today with our food. It's time to heal our communities and families and take our power back.
Revolution looks like people making better choices. Revolution looks like laws changing. Revolution looks like power being distributed in fair, equitable ways. It's just really power in the hands of the people, ultimately, instead of we are suffering or fearful of power. As we recognize our own power and we exercise it.
We can take power by pushing stuff that's sustainable for ourselves and for our lives and for our families.
You have to come to the realization that this is what you really want to do. Because once you come to the realization, it only takes one day. When you come to that realization, when you're ready to stop, you will.
And the affirmation is the power to heal is within you, and you have the power to heal yourself.
Food we eat is our entire existence. It's all of us. It's every part of us.
We have to question an economic system that exploits people, that exploits the planet, that exploits animals. It's just like...
So if enough people start demanding healthier foods, that's what you'll find, and that's already happening.
We're saying no more. We're not going to fall prey to the system. I'm not going to buy your garbage food, which means I'm not going to end up on your garbage pharmaceuticals, which means I'm not going to end up in your hospital and on dialysis and making you millions of dollars for the rest of my shortened life.
We don't really embrace how powerful we are. We don't realize that if enough of us said no, then no's the answer, and then that's what's going to be.
There's so many vices at play all the time. And if we could change our mindset, we could be more responsible, not for the sake of being more responsible to appease somebody, but for the sake of uplifting ourselves.
Again, it's our duty and responsibility, and especially as a woman, I feel like we're the first teachers, we're the first doctors, we're the first healers, are supposed to be.
The one way to fight systemic racism by saying, you know what, I'm not eating your chicken, I'm not eating your beef, I'm not eating your cheese, I am out of this.
If enough awareness can be brought to our society as a whole, things can happen.
We owe it to our babies and our children to bring them up the right way and teach them good habits and not saddle them with all of this baggage that we ourselves are trying to get rid of.
Just start getting plants in your life, man. And start just knowing what you're putting in your body. Just start knowing.
If I can do it, anybody can do it.
That's why I like Pac's quote of let's change the way we eat, let's change the way we live, and let's change the way we treat each other.
The only thing that we can do to change this is we have to start caring by giving people the information that they need. No one can do it better than the hip hop generation. All they need is one mic.
How do we succeed in a system that's corrupt and filled with greed? It's so deceiving, tell me how can we believe? Ain't no love in the belly of the beast. They take us out one by one, then it's 2 by 2. Conquer and divide is the rule. Tell me how we gonna move. Tell me how we gonna move. Gotta watch what we consume. Swear they poison in the song and dance. All around this country, it's so clear to see they heartless plans. It's all a scam, they can't afford to give us all a chance. They cut our legs from underneath and make it a law to stand. They took their markers and red lines and drew them all in sand. Designed the ghettos, no fair housing, no good education. Then cut off access to fresh water, fruit, and vegetation. Left us with liquor stores and McDonald's and medication. It's pure eradication. How we supposed to ever know the truth when they manipulate the news? Misinformation's being used to groom and infiltrate the youth so they'll grow up to be confused. It's not a game and I don't claim to know a lot of things, but it's gotta change, tell me. How do we succeed in a system that's corrupt and filled with greed? It's so deceiving, tell me how can we believe? Ain't no love in the belly of the beast. They take us out one by one, then it's 2 by 2. Conquer and divide is the rule. Tell me how we gonna move. Tell me how we gonna move. Gotta watch what we consume. Gotta watch what we consume. Swear they poison in the food. corrupt and filled with greed. It's so deceiving, tell me how can we believe? Ain't no love in the belly of the beast. They take us out one by one, then it's 2 by 2. Conquer and divide is the rule, tell me how we gonna move. Gotta watch what we consume. Swear they poison in the food.